Welcome to Live Well, Dream Big. I'm Suzanne Monroe, founder of the International Association of Wellness Professionals, where I've been teaching people how to live a life of wellness, tap into their passion, and go for their dreams for over 15 years. I believe living well and dreaming big starts with ourselves. This podcast will show you how to create a healthy, holistic life, empower your mindset, follow your dreams, and make a big impact. Let's dive in right now. Well, welcome back, everyone, to Live Well, Dream Big. I'm very excited for today's episode because I have a special guest with me, Shiva Rose. I want to tell you a little bit about Shiva because a decade ago, after suffering from a life-threatening autoimmune disorder, Hollywood actress Shiva Rose made it her mission to find a more holistic way to natural health and beauty. As she grew her own organic herbs and flowers, she developed her own self-care and beauty rituals and ultimately healed her life. And this led her to create the holistic lifestyle website, The Local Rose, to share her findings with others and really go on to develop her own non-toxic, all-natural skincare line at shivarose.com. And she's the author of Whole Beauty, one of my personal favorite wellness books. I have it here with me today, where she shares daily ritual and natural recipes for lifelong beauty and wellness. And she's a leader and entrepreneur in the world of natural beauty, wellness, and lifestyle. Welcome, Shiva. So glad you're here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I love hearing it's sometimes nice to hear those beautiful compliments when especially on those days when you don't feel it.
Yeah. You're like, wait, and then just to hear someone share your story, you're like, oh yeah, that happened.
Yeah. You're like, oh, okay, maybe I'm not such a slacker today.
I love it. Well, before we started recording for the podcast, I was saying, I just love your book so much, first of all. And, having read so many wellness books over the years, I mean, for me to say this is one of my favorites is, I don't say lightly. And for those of you on the video podcast, some of you can see the book here. It's just absolutely beautiful. And that's kind of how I ended up with it. My husband was going out there. We have this very cute little store in our town that has just the best products and the most unique books. And he was looking for a special gift for me. And he saw this and he immediately was like, oh, this is so beautiful. I have to get it for her. So he brought it home and I was just carrying it around. I was like, I don't even know what's inside. It's just so pretty. And it's just as beautiful inside. Well, the funny story is about a year later, he goes to the same store. He's looking for another gift. I'm very lucky. He's looking for another gift. He comes home with the book again. He forgot that he got it, but he was so drawn to it again, right? Because it's just shining on the shelf. And he's like, ooh, I'm getting this. So I had two copies of the book.
He's helping my book promotion go
on. Yes. So I thought that was so funny, but let's kind of start with the book. Let's start there. I know there's so many things we could talk about today, but your book, Whole Beauty, it kind of, one of the things I love is that you kind of start out you share your personal story. You share this beautiful story actually, where you kind of take us back to when you were a young girl, I think in Iran, and you were kind of gathering flowers and plants in your garden and making a little paste and mashing it into your face. I was like, oh, I could picture you. And your story kind of evolves from there. So just tell us a little bit, maybe get started there. Just tell us a little bit about your story.
Sure. Yes. And what's the name of the store, by the way, before I forget?
Oh, it's called Weeds.
Weeds. Okay. Weeds, I'll have to thank them. Yeah. Thank you, Weeds. Thank you. So yes, my mom's American and my dad's Iranian, and I was raised in Iran. And it's funny, we were talking earlier about how I'm in rural Texas now. It reminds me a lot of my childhood because we were in rural Iran, and it was sort of an idyllic childhood, being just immersed in nature and living with the sea, close to the seasons, and yes, always having that connection to beautiful plants and flowers and fruits, and then the revolution took place when I was 10 and we escaped, especially because my mom was American and the country was in turmoil. So we literally went from, I went from this idyllic childhood to being a refugee, leaving everything, being woken up in the middle of the night. Well, we lived under martial law for 6 months, no electricity, canned foods, truly such a crazy idea. We can't even fathom it here in this country, but hearing the gunshots in the distance, And then literally being woken up and taken on a plane, smuggled out, and then that was a whole ordeal. And so yeah, it was quite a traumatic entry to coming back to the States. And that sort of imprinted. And later I found out I had autoimmune issues in my 20s, and I think a lot of some of that may have stemmed from that childhood incident, that you sort of, as children, we sort of suppress things so we can be there for our parents and be strong. It's interesting to look at the dynamics and how your health can reflect that. So that sort of prompted that journey for me.
Wow. So you escape, your family escapes, you end up growing up here in the United States, and then fast forward years later, you find out you have this autoimmune condition. I know you also kind of shared there was like this rock bottom moment though. You've discovered you have the autoimmune issue, and you say the only good thing about hitting rock bottom is that you have nowhere to go but up, which I love. What was the rock bottom moment? Because I think for people listening too, many people are on this journey, right? Where this life journey or this wellness journey, and sometimes something happens and it seems so horrible, but it is the only place to go is up. What happened to you?
Thank you. Thank you for capturing my book like that too. It's so nice to be seen and heard. Yes, well, it's the phoenix rising. I think some of us may have a few of those. I mean, I've had a few moments in my life where everything burns down to the ground and I basically have to rebuild. And now I've reached a point in my life where I'm like, I think about it all. Now I'm like, okay, well, if that happens, I'll be fine. Of course it'll be painful and I'll be crying on the floor in a puddle, but I will pick myself up and I will recover. It's like the phoenix. You can't let it kill you. And actually those are the things that get us to grow. They get us to do the work, because we're lazy. We wouldn't do the work unless we're forced to. I mean, some of us do have that internal fire to always get better and search. But I know for myself, I didn't do the growth work until my heart was broken, until my, life was broken and my health was broken. Like that's when I started to do all the work. And, and that was, I think that rock bottom was, I think, when I got divorced and my autoimmune stuff came back and I had to figure out a new way of living. And that's right before that.
Yeah, and I hear what you're saying. You have the house gets burned down. It has to be rebuilt. And, I can resonate with that too. I had a burning the house down moment and rebuilding chapter in my life as well. And thinking back too, I think what I recall about that time is that it's just so scary because it's initially, you don't know what's going to happen next, right? And yet that's how much trust you have to have in something greater, that you will rebuild, you will go to a new place. What was it like for you thinking back to that time? Can you remember, like, what was it like to be like, okay, I'm totally starting over? Did you ever think you were going to end up like doing what you're doing today? You wrote this book, you have this amazing online store, and I know you're doing many other things as well.
Yes, not at all. I mean, that's the beauty of it, right? Like you said, if you trust, and then you'll be surprised by what will reveal itself. I was an actress for like my whole life, and then that phoenix rising rebuilding moment was when I had two little girls. I knew I couldn't act anymore. It was getting hard on my body and my self-esteem, and also I couldn't travel because I had to raise them. So I basically went to what felt good. And intuitively, what felt good was to get rid of the television, leave Hollywood, grow my own food, get chickens, get honey. This is kind of what my mom did actually in Iran. She had honeybees and we grew some of our food. Go back to the basics, just start over from scratch as to what felt good. I had all the autoimmune stuff flared up. So it was kind of like what felt good. What felt good to me was getting into the earth. That just seemed like right at the time. And, this is before pre-goop, right? So it was not pink or cool. I think my friends were like, what the hell are you doing? What are you doing buying chickens and bees in Los Angeles? But I just started my blog. I started the local Rose. I was like, okay, you know what? If 2 people read it, that's fine. I'm going to start there and just document my journey with this. And then, it's just sort of builds, and that's the exciting thing. And I tell people, just if you're following your intuition and your heart and your soul's calling, then it will lead you the right way. Maybe not the way you think it is, but it will eventually lead you to the right path.
I'm a firm believer in that also. I know it's so hard for people to believe that that's actually possible, but it is. It is, and that is what happens, but you're exactly right. It may not be what you thought it was going to be, but ultimately it's what was meant to be, which is amazing. I know you said you had to start over from an earthier place. I remember reading that in the book, and that's kind of what you're describing now. It's like you had to get back to nature, and you also went back to your roots, like your childhood and your upbringing. So I just love how that, and it's so funny because back then, yeah, I mean, now it's like, okay, that's maybe what's on trend to do. More people are doing that, but you were probably a little bit more of a lone ranger at the time.
Oh yeah, this is 15 years ago. Yes, because my youngest daughter was 2, and yeah, no, it felt a little nuts, and that's also how my skincare line came about. Because at the time, it was like where I was at, where like I wasn't quite like granola, hippie, dreadlock vibe, health food store, and then I wasn't the Hollywood at all. I was somewhere like in the, like, I liked nice things. I always said like I wanted to be, in a beautiful tent in Big Sur, camping with beautiful organic sheets. Like that was my, somewhere in the middle where it was like, but you're also living in harmony with the land. Like I wanted to live in harmony. I didn't feel like using all these chemicals on my body, seeing what it was, realizing all the stuff with GMOs and the food we eat. Like it was just like an awakening. I guess it was a lot of people say we're having an awakening right now, but after with the last 2 years with COVID. And I feel like some of us had the awakening a little earlier. And maybe that's what it was, just like a wake up call. And it was also to heal my body. I was sick. I was so sick. I felt terrible. So it was also on a selfish level just to feel good again.
Mm-hmm. Well, I love that. I love how you said that too. It was like somewhere in between these two worlds. And I maybe that's why I resonate with the book so much, because I feel the same way. It's like you want to have all these natural, pure things, but what's wrong with luxury and pleasure too, right? And
right.
That's the funny thing. Well, I'll go camping with my family, and my husband has to laugh. He's like, we're out there in the middle of nowhere. I'm like, but I have to have certain things, to like bring the right elements. So, but I also smiled when I read your book, and just because let's talk a little bit about the beauty industry, because you mentioned your skincare line. You recounted how definitely, back, 10, 15 years ago, the natural beauty projects were not only granola, as you said, but they were relegated really to the health food stores. They were really more about like cleansing rather than like really like self-care and pampering. And I remember that. And I remember trying to find stuff, and, you'd have like 2 choices or whatever. And you're in the grocery store. You're like, oh, this is kind of weird. So I love how you've taken this like pure, clean, natural, even really sacred, like all these elements of nature, and then made them luxurious and beautiful for women. So let's talk a little bit about, tell us just, I guess, how beauty products can actually be sort of inspiring and healing. I mean, because I think for so long, the beauty industry has been about changing who we are, maybe trying to fit some mold, or, on top of that, doing it in a toxic way.
Yes. No, it's so true. It's like once you go down that rabbit hole, I mean, I just read that women acquire 5 pounds of chemicals every year on their bodies from the products they use.
Oh my gosh.
That's like 5 pounds.
Like 5 pounds of weight, or?
Yes, okay. Yes, of chemicals.
Oh my gosh.
Or we're even exposed to something like 120 chemicals, just with all the, sprays and perfumes and nail polish, like it's crazy. Of course, our hormones are going to be affected, and our children's hormones, which is showing, and the fertility rates right now are plummeting. And, people say we're having a population no, we're having a population decline. People can't have children. It's like a huge issue because of all this stuff, which again, 15 years ago, I was like, oh, this was beginning to dawn on me. And yes, I started to study Ayurveda, and Ayurveda is such a beautiful, 5,000-year-old tradition and ritual. Like, for example, I'm sure you've heard this, but when a woman has a baby, for 40 days, she's fed. Her and the baby are fed and massaged and loved. Like, that is so foreign like I remember being up and like at Whole Foods after day, 5, like in tears,
Yeah. Right.
like it's not built into our culture at all.
Oh
So
yeah.
like the idea is that if you nourish and nurture the mother and the child, then you're not gonna have postpartum, you're not gonna have colic, all these things that they don't have there, because of this. It's more of like an insurance, to make sure they're supported. But that sort of clicked for me. I was like, yes, as a mother, a single mom raising 2 kids, I was like so depleted. I was like, I need to like, how do I nourish myself if I didn't, through what? And I learned through Ayurveda, through these beautiful oils and beautiful herbs and the sun and the moon and the earth. And like these became my parents. These became my nourishing tribe, And then, of course, I met some friends too, and that helped replenish that. It's just sort of like builds on itself. Like attracts like.
I love that in Ayurveda that the women are like so cared for and like just nurtured during that time. I remember when I had my son, I have just one son. I was kind of going the traditional route, and then I ended up meeting a friend who kind of told me about home birth, and I ended up having a home birth with a midwife. Yeah, and which was very, not only maybe it's still very unusual, but at least in my part of the world, it's like really, really weird for people.
I have chills. That is. I mean, it's crazy that it's become so, uncommon.
Yeah. But what I was going to say about that was kind of interesting is that the midwife was very much kind of that philosophy. Now she probably knew I wasn't going to be able to do 40 days or even 30 days, but she was like, you need to stay kind of like in this birthplace, in this room, like in this part of the house, and just really like stay up here, stay upstairs in your room, and like really nurture yourself for as long as possible. And I think I stayed up there for like definitely a week. I think it was getting close to 10 days. Like we didn't leave the little circle, right? But then eventually I was like, I knew like some moment came and I was like, darn, I have to leave this. Like I have to go downstairs. I didn't want to leave the bubble, but I remember that experience, and it was so amazing. But anyway, so you're talking about Ayurveda. Tell us a little bit about, I mean, I know it's a big topic, but did you grow up practicing it as part of your culture, or how did it end up coming into your life?
Not at all. And that's what I was going to say with you too. And with me, when I had my children, I remember it's also foreign to receive that.
Yeah.
There's like a feeling of guilt. I know I grappled with that too when I was like, I felt kind of like guilty or bad for like being and receiving. And that's a paradigm we need to shift, and maybe it's happening now. No, I wasn't raised with that. I mean, in Persian culture is similar in Ayurveda in some ways, but it wasn't until that window I started taking classes and, and practicing it. And Kundalini yoga was a big part of my life too. And that, is based on all those ancient practices. And it's all about it's like a technology, Kundalini. And it's sort of like is about getting your organs and your glands to be, the best that they can be with all these rituals. So I think it was like a bunch of things brought me to that world.
So with Ayurveda and with Kundalini, like sometimes we go through a time in our life where like all that becomes our medicine, like what we need to heal ourselves and like transform, but then like we kind of adapt, or sometimes it becomes our lifestyle. Like, is it still something that you're really, it's a big part of for you, or like how are things adapted? Because it's been so much time has gone by.
No, definitely. I do. I mean, I don't do a lot, maybe 11 minutes a day, but I have to do some meditation like that, just to connect to myself and ground. And now I also practice tea ceremony, which I've been doing for the last decade, which is drinking tea in silence here, in the morning with the sunrise. So I just put the sunrise and I'll have some tea. And I think there's a chapter in the book about that too, which is another meditation practice, which I love. I just love it because it's all about, you have to be present when you're boiling the water and steeping the tea. And for me, that's a big issue. I have such a monkey mind, my mind's so, so all over the place. So it really gets me to take at least a half hour in the morning and focus So that's another practice I do.
I'm so glad you mentioned that practice, because I remember reading about the tea ceremony in the book. And I remember there's a picture, maybe you're with friends or family and really enjoying this ceremony. But I'm just taking in now, and you probably said it in the book, I'm taking in now, you can have your own personal tea ceremony every morning. Is that what I'm getting?
Yes.
I love that.
Yes, and it's so important. It's like a non-negotiable. I have to do that before I take care of the animals and my daughter and life and work. I have to have that moment.
I love that. And I know too, you talk in the book as it relates to Ayurveda, there's the ohas, which are, tell us what ohas are, because I'm kind of curious about that. And I know there's different practices and things.
I love the idea of ojas. It's like it's almost like the juiciness of women especially need high ojas, and that's why in Ayurveda they say we need oils, we need like ghee. And believe me, when I heard this, I was like, oh, what? I was like this vegetarian, starved, no oils, no butter. I was like, oh, this is blasphemous. But I realized when you find out your brain is 80% fat, your brain is fat. It needs fat. And once I started to consume ghee and butter and these things, I was like, oh my God, it was like a light bulb went on. I was less depressed. And then, your hair, this is why, they have such beautiful, luxurious hair in those places, because the oils are feeding the ojas, which is like juicy quality. It's sort of like that feeds everything else, your hormones and, your zest for life. They also believe in like fruit. Ayurveda is big on like certain fruits at different times of the year. They stew and cook fruit with cinnamon, usually towards winter. And the summer, it's more like watermelons and, juicy fruits. And I feel so much better. I don't think I could live without it.
That's amazing. It's impacted your lifestyle so much. And I know for people who are listening who are like, okay, I'm just hearing about this, or maybe I've heard about it, but I'm really feeling like I want to do something new. Of course, read Whole Beauty, because I think there's so many practices in there. But what would you say is just kind of like one thing someone could do to get started with maybe experimenting or noticing some of the benefits of an Ayurvedic lifestyle?
Well, they in Ayurveda, it's sort of broken down to what, it's almost like in Chinese medicine, there's the elements of air, fire, water. Well, in Ayurveda, they have that. It's Vata, Pitta, Kapha, which are these like 3 sections, and you can be a little bit of each. And it's really interesting when you dive down into Ayurveda, because you can see, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm definitely that, or I'm definitely that, and you can usually tell by your body type and the way your brain works. Like for me, I was very Vata, which is like wind and airy and, brittle, dry. So I need more like Kapha, which is more like relaxation and oils and fats and, slowing down. And it kind of like makes sense. Like you sort of gravitate towards the things that your body will need. So I would say just, there's so much information. Book covers it, and you can always go online and take a look. And there's a great place in California called Surya Spa. The woman Marta Sofer, that's who I started seeing in person. She does these things called abhayangas, where they like massage you with these oils. It's sort of like a cleanse. So maybe look and see. They're popping up now places. I'm sure there's like an Ayurvedic place somewhere, nearby. I would look into those things, and the dal, the sort of the meals. You can start preparing the meals. Banyan Botanicals is a great site. They have all sorts of great, recipes and herbs, and there's just so much there.
Yeah, I know, it's so expansive. There's so many pieces. That's why I was kind of curious. And I think, like you said, doing a little bit of research and then seeing what you're drawn to, and that was another thing about your book I loved, is just all the different kind of options to play with and the rituals, right? And seeing what you're really drawn to, because ritual is such a big part of your book. And you say it's the simplest and biggest way you can really honor yourself and really enhance your well-being, which I loved. Why is ritual so important? Like, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think it's also, we're like from the beginning, I think we were connected through ritual and through sacredness. And we're spiritual beings. And what makes a ritual is the intention, right? So, there's a difference between just slathering on some oil or like really taking a moment and like thinking about, thank you to these arms. Thank you for these feet. Our body listens, and I'm thinking to myself, I need to follow my own. When was the last time I really took the time to honor and like give care to this vessel so that I can go and take care of my children, and the land and the animals and my partner. Like I have to be my cup has to be full first, and this is a way that I think we can fill our cups through ritual and connection.
I couldn't agree more. And I think the ritual piece, sometimes people think, oh yeah, I should be caring more for myself. We have so many women who are so busy, whether they're mothers or working or entrepreneurs, or actually doing all of those things at once and more, right? Yeah. And it's like, in your mind, okay, I should be caring for myself. But then you wonder, well, what am I going to do right now? I'm just so exhausted, or I can't think of something, right? And so I think what's so powerful about your book is just the rituals, and you could just pick one thing. One of my favorite rituals from the book is the hydrosols, which I really loved because there are so many amazing kind of practices in the book. But what I loved about that is you can create them yourself. You have different options of things we can kind of play with and try. And then they not only balance your skin, but you can use them for meditation or different seasons you have listed. And it's something that, to me, making it is actually part of the ritual, and then obviously using it as well.
Yes. And it gets you into and sometimes when we're in that limbic part of the brain, where we can shut off our analytical chatter and, the critic, and get into something of a ritual. That's why it's such good medicine, because hopefully it's like a meditation. You can shut off that part of the brain and get into the making of something and, getting lost in it, which is so good for us.
I totally agree. Now I'm going to ask you this, and you may not remember this, but in the book, you tell the story of your first ever ritual and how it just like opened you up to like everything. Can you recount that story now?
Was it the one in New Mexico? In New Mexico, the sweat lodge?
I didn't think it was in the sweat lodge. Yeah. But or just how it related to ritual, or like what that meant for you.
Yeah, I was 22 and I went to New Mexico with my then partner and his mother, and she took me to a sweat with a woman who practiced Native American rituals and traditions, and I was I was blown. I just couldn't believe that this whole world existed. And it was a very difficult sweat. It was like a 3 or 4 hour sweat, and it was very uncomfortable. And I don't know if you've ever done a sweat, but you kind of like you get face to face with your fears, both on a physical level and a mental and emotional, and it really tests you. But I remember just like I had never known that people did things like this, prayer and just the beautiful connecting to the land. And it was in the snow, and it was, but you go into this hot sweat lodge and, wood burning. And then afterwards, I remember when we came out, the woman who was holding the space for us had this beautiful table laid out with all these incredible foods. And I mean, I felt like I was, on psychedelics, I think, because I was just like, everything was just shimmering and rainbows. But it was such a good, right. We don't have rites of passages anymore in our culture. And this is so important, I think, for boys and girls and for beings. Other cultures do this when they're teens, and I think that's such an important piece that we all need to connect us to being human.
That's something to really take in. Like, how do we bring about these rites of passage into our culture, into our lifestyle? And even if you can't do something major, like go off to a sweat lodge or a retreat or wherever, that's what I love about the practices in the book. It's like, okay, what small rituals can you bring really into the everyday life, right? And just find these little moments. And I think you talk about that too. It's like you can transform your routines into rituals.
Yes. I mean, with the sunrise and sunset, that's something we all have access to. You know what I mean? It doesn't take money. You just, the sun and the moon, like connecting to those things right there is like that could be the start.
I love that. It's so simple. You just go outside. There it is.
Yeah.
Right. But we're like, we don't even notice. We're like, oh, sunny, cloudy, whatever, like, or moon, whatever. Right. We're just moving through our day, but it's always there for us. And I had that experience the other night because there was a full moon and I went out and we had family over and everybody was going to kind of rush off. And I said, wait, stop, look at the full moon. And nobody, we didn't see it right away kind of thing because it wasn't in the mindset. And then we kind of all took it in together and it was this special moment. And then we got a photograph. And of course the moon never looks the same in the picture. But
yes. But yeah, that's a whole thing. I did a moon course on my site because I felt like we used to get the ultraviolet rays from the moon at one time. We used to work under the moon. We used to sleep under the moon, and we are all deficient now in moonlight. And that's something that really, especially for women, it balances your hormones. It helps your moods. Like there's so much that we don't do anymore, which was all part of our daily life at one point, at one time.
I have actually never heard that. You hear so much about being vitamin D deficient. People have been afraid of the sun. They're not getting out of the sun, but I never thought about moonlight. So what is suggested? Is it go out at night and hang out under the stars for a little while?
There's moon bathing, which, many cultures do, many people do. There's biodynamic farming, for example, which is based on the moon cycle and actually makes your food taste better, planting with the moon time. So I would say if anyone's interested in the moon and I, it's called, it's on my site, and it's a whole course on the moon and how to connect to the moon and historical facts about the moon that are so fascinating. Like the reason why our calendars are 28 days still is, the moon cycle. It's still left over from the matriarchal time when it's based on a woman's cycle. There's things like that. You're like, oh, wow, that is like, you start putting all these little pieces together, which is interesting.
Right. Like in many ways in our present society, we have all these sort of remnants from the past that like they're still driving what we do, but nobody realizes it or they don't acknowledge it. Right. So I think that's so huge to kind of like take all that in and
take all that in. And the feminine, has always been the connection to the moon. Of course, now I'm obsessed with the sun too. The sun, the sun's been vilified when in reality, it's like healing my thyroid by getting sunlight every day, for 15, 20 minutes. I sit in the look at the sun and I try to get the sun on me. And there was a time when I would get melasma from the sun. But now that I've healed my diet and I don't eat seed oils, I don't eat, I take certain antioxidants. Now the sun is like, filling me up and helping me and nourishing me. So there's so many places we can be like, have these aha moments,
I love that. It's like the balance between the two. And let's talk a little bit about slow beauty because, in cultures that practice Ayurveda, you say the grandmothers and the mothers have been like passing down these rituals that we've been talking about and other rituals really to their daughters for centuries, right? There's this lineage of these sort of ancient methods that are still alive in those cultures today. But this notion of slow beauty or kind of this beauty being created from the inside out with oils, with foods, and different things that you talk about in the book. Tell us a little bit about slow beauty and how that ties into what you're doing today.
Yeah. Well, I think right now we have such a fix it, Band-Aid reaction, like doing these peels, that you look good for a while and then eventually have a detrimental effect. And it's sort of like the idea of slow beauty is like over time, in Ayurveda, they don't believe in stripping the face. They believe in like feeding the microbiome, doing as little as possible, leaving it intact. And I know I personally, I remember years ago, like in the 90s, I'd go do a microdermabrasion and I'd be like, I look older now. It looks like more like, drawn and dry, and that's sort of like the same idea. Slow beauty is like adding and nourishing, not taking away. And that's again through diet, through and over time, like a lot of my products, I always say it works over time. It's not going to be like, quick fix like some of the things we see now, but that's also better in the long run, so hopefully we look great down the road too.
And I know what I love about it too is like you've been talking about it. We live in this world that's kind of dulling the senses. You talk about this in the book. We're overstimulated and we're kind of losing this whole, desire, pleasure, these rituals, self-care. And it's just a way to kind of come back to all that too. And as you think about, I'm going to put the link in the show notes to your different sites out there, where your blog is. And of course, Shiva Rose and Local Rose. But is there one like favorite product or thing out there? Cause I was looking myself, I was like, oh, this is so fun and so great. But is there one where you're like, okay, this is a great place to start for someone who's just kind of like looking to get their feet wet, but not their feet?
Yes. I love the Golden Soul body butter because it's like such a beautiful, rich color, orangey yellow, and it has all these incredible ingredients, and it just feels so luxurious, and the smell is like a frankincense and chat. And I love that. I mean, that could be a great way to just do it on your feet and your elbows, and at night before you go to bed, just starting like that. For the face, the glow balm is always a hit. It's like a beautiful balm that just gives you a glowy, dewy look. And that's been, I think the girls in Brooklyn made it a hit because they realized it was like protecting their faces from the cold. And you live somewhere cold. So I know, like, when the heat's on so high and, the elements on the outside, it really protects, it's like a barrier between you and the environment. So I'd say those two are my favorite.
Well, that's fun. There's a lot to explore there. I want to share one other thing I saw in the book that I think is just something great that everyone can kind of carry with them today. And I'll call it the 3 B's, but you have this beautiful mantra that you've practiced or that you share. And it says, I am bountiful, I am blissful, I am beautiful. And you mention it a few different times in the book. I thought it was so nice, just as a simple ritual. Does it mean something to you personally, or is it just?
Thank you. Well, it's a Kundalini mantra. And it's just a beautiful, I think it's, for the divine feminine, connecting to the feminine within you, the divine feminine. And it's just like a reminder. Sorry, these flies, these Texans flies are so annoying. But yeah, it's just sometimes we need to be reminded again, maybe we don't have a partner or maybe we're giving so much to our children. Sometimes we need, again, to be reminded that we are bountiful, we are blissful, we are beautiful. And it's almost like when you say that, words are so powerful. That's why mantras are so powerful. They sort of like can make the neural pathways in your brain connect, and you're like, okay, if I am that. It's like those words I am are so powerful, right? So like I used to, my children, I'd always tell them to say to themselves, everything always works out for me. That's your mantra. Everything always works out for me. Then it gets you out of the victim mode, or if anything, you have to really say it, even when you don't believe it. And then your body begins to believe it. So that's how powerful we are.
Right. And some people are like, oh, how's that even possible? But you're right. Your body believes it. But then you also, you change your behaviors and actions because you're believing, oh, well, all things work out for me. So you actually do things differently.
Yes.
It's all connected.
It is connected.
This has been such a fun and inspiring conversation. I'm glad we had this time together just to talk a little bit more about whole beauty and everything you're up to in the world. Is there anything else you wanted to share that I didn't ask you about?
Oh, well, I'm so grateful for what you're doing. And I just did a course on health. If anyone is suffering from autoimmune issues, you can get it on my link tree. It's on my site too, the Local Rose, or on my Instagram, Local Rose. And it's where I interview all these incredible doctors and practitioners on how to get to the root causes of things. Because so many people are suffering right now from autoimmune, thyroid, diabetes, cancer, hormones, and this gets to the root cause. Because I think, and also in our culture, a lot of doctors just give you medicines and medications and that's it for the rest of your life. But these doctors and these practitioners get to the root of it, which is always either mold, parasite, bacteria, cavitation, which is where your root canals may not have been taken correctly. Like it's such an incredible project. I'm so proud that I got to do it. So if anyone is suffering from health issues, struggling, whole health, and you can use the code WHOLE, all capital, for half off if they're interested in the course. So I just wanted to share that with all your listeners out there.
Oh, I'm so glad you shared that. And that sounds like an incredible project, right? Because those who are suffering oftentimes go out there, they start looking online, they're trying to find answers, or maybe they go to their doctor and the doctor's like, okay, you're fine. And they're not getting the answers. They're not really finding the solutions, right? So to bring together the people who are like, okay, this is it. This is the pathway. Feels so supportive.
It's so incredible. This is one of the things I'm most proud about, because there's Whole Beauty, the book, and now there's Whole Health. And I feel like you can't do your work in the planet if you're suffering. If you have anything that's debilitating or pain, you can't go help others. You can't create your business. You can't raise your children. So this is like sending this as a gift for people to just, get themselves in good shape.
Well, thank you so much. Thanks for sharing that. And we'll put the links in the show notes with that code as well for everybody.
Yes, thank you so much.
Well, again, Shiva, thank you so much for being here. It was really an honor to get to meet you, someone whose work I've followed in your book. So to be here live with you was such a treat for me. And I just want to thank everyone for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining me for today's episode of Live Well, Dream Big. I hope you enjoyed today's conversation. And I want to invite you to take your next step toward living well and dreaming big by downloading the Live Well, Dream Big lifestyle book. It's the ultimate guide to becoming your best self and living life on your own terms. You can grab your complimentary copy by going to the link in the show notes or heading directly to iawpwellnesscoach.com/guide. That's iawpwellnesscoach.com/guide.